Okay, how we doing, everybody? Hope you're all well. Gonna give about 10 minutes here on the Satire devices sheet. Make sure you understand. It seemed like, based on what I was seeing on your charts and some of the feedback I was getting, some of y'all were concerned and confused about some things, so I want to try and clarify it for you. Remember, I am live, whatever that means, from 11 to 11:30 every weekday. I'm checking my blog, checking the email consistently throughout the entire school day, so please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd like to know that you're getting this information. Right now it's all about the teaching and about the learning and not about the assessment, so just keep paying attention, keep up the best we can. Hopefully we'll be back to normal in no time here. Alright, I want to start with a definition of satire from Robert Diani's, actually it's an AP text, but I want to read this to you. Says, satire is a literary work that criticizes human misconduct and ridicules vices, stupidities, and follies. So clearly these guys won't be lacking work for any time in the foreseeable future. So anything that essentially is intended to ridicule certain types of human behaviors and done so in a way that can be humorous a lot of times, but more than anything, it's kind of provocative and makes you think about things in a different way. So, okay, so on the handout, there's two types of satires that we're dealing with. Something called Horatian. Both these are named after ancient Greek satirists. Horatian, which is the kind we see the most. It's fairly lighthearted, fairly innocuous, intended just to be entertaining, but also to make a point. And that's going to be things like basic movie parodies, Onion News Network, Saturday Night Live skits, Mad TV, that kind of thing. And then we have the Juvenalian satire, which is coming from a little bit more of a purposeful concept, which is going to be a little bit more angry, as the sheet says, angry, caustic, resentful, personal. This can be a little bit more geared towards actually seeing some type of a result than the Horatian, which tends to be just a little bit more entertaining, maybe. This would be Modest Proposal, which we're going to read by Jonathan Swift. I also include lots of political cartoons and some of the more biting type of satire we see, political satire we see on television, like Daily Show and that kind of stuff. So let's get to the devices real quick. A lot of these you're going to know. I'm not going to go through every one on the page because I feel like a lot of these things you're already going to be familiar with. But I want to hit some of the ones that you guys were asking me about. So under the heading of humor, there's lots of different devices that we use that can be considered humorous, but still effective in getting across the point of satire. So let me just bust through these real quick. Exaggeration is fairly self-explanatory. Best way to think of this is anytime you take something like, remember if you ever gone to like on spring break in PC Beach down there in the Redneck Riviera, and you have these guys that'll like on the they'll like draw a caricature of you like for like a screen print on a t-shirt or something like that. And generally what that does is it exaggerates some type of a feature, right? So like, if you draw a caricature, if you have I don't know, maybe a slightly larger than normal nose, they will draw it in a way that really exaggerates the size of the nose. This could, you can see examples of this in all kinds of things. It's largely a physical technique, but you can also see it just in the exaggeration of various things in terms of what we're reading as well. Understatement is like the opposite of hyperbole. This would be like, the example on the sheet is like saying someone's not very handsome, which basically means they're really ugly. So it's the opposite effect. It's called light to tease as well, where you use an understatement to make a point. It serves the same kind of function as hyperbole, but in the other direction, if that makes sense. Incongruity contains different things. Inconsistence of situations, what we call anachronistic elements or anachronisms. That will be anything that's kind of like out of place or time or seems to not fit the scenario. An example would be like seeing a cowboy in an old Western movie walk into a bar, and pull out a cell phone. It's just like something that doesn't belong in place or time, or that we don't expect to happen. And a lot of these devices depend on the unexpected. kind of a twist in what we would expect to happen. Surprise, exaggeration, things like that. That's very effective both in humor and in satire. Deflation is would essentially be anything that kind of takes someone who you would expect more of and give you less. The examples on the sheet would be like if you have an English professor or an English teacher like myself that might mispronounce a word or not know the simple answer to a question. Or if you see videos of like a president who's supposed to be, well, presidential, getting out of a helicopter and like tripping and falling. So anytime you kind of minimize the importance of something that's normally considered important, that's called deflation. Linguistic games, a lot of you asked me about this. This is something that is a umbrella term for any type of wordplay. It could be something called malapropisms, which would be like the incorrect use of a word in a humorous way. I have a lot of phrases I'll use in class and stuff that maybe you've heard this. One would be like, if it's not one thing, it's your mother, okay, which is clearly a mispronunciation of the phrase. If it's not one thing, it's another. That's a malapropism, incorrect usage of a phrase. Puns, you understand, any kind of strange rhymes, creative use of like assonance or dissonance, that kind of thing. You've heard me use the expression lost in the sauce in class. And again, it's like the musical quality of that rhyme creates that word play. So anytime you see that, that's an example of like what we call a linguistic game. Surprise is quite self-evident. Any kind of twisted endings, anything unexpected, anything that catches you off guard tends to have an impact on you. It's memorable, and so it's very effective in satire because that element of surprise makes you remember because it stands out, it's distinctive. Okay, so let's just bust real quick through the rest of these. Irony, we've talked about irony ad nauseum throughout your high school career. I think you understand that term. Invective, quite simply, is a term we use for name calling, but a lot of times the name calling can identify the problem. So let's say that you call somebody a greedy, inconsiderate cheapskate, then you may be trying to address some type of an issue pertaining to someone who suffers from avarice on some level, whether it be a government institution or an insurance company or what have you. Mock encomium, this is one y'all ask me about pretty frequently. This is praise which is only apparent and it actually suggests blame. So the best example I can think of here for mock encomium would be, let's say we all took a vocab quiz and you all just bombed it for whatever reason. It was just really bad, bloodbath soup sandwich situation, lots of F's. Then I might say something like, great job failing that quiz, guys. That's mock encomium. The fact that I'm seemingly praising you for what is obviously an insufficient act or something that doesn't meet my standards makes it mock encomium. So that's that. Grotesque sounds like what it is. It's basically dark humor, black humor, sick humor, inappropriate humor, things that you wouldn't normally see made in light of. But the use of the grotesque creates that kind of tension between something that's kind of seemingly funny, but at the same time, it's quite dark and horrific. This is exercised frequently by people in the medical profession, police officers, military people that are forced to deal with really difficult situations, so therefore making light of it, somehow deflating it in a sense, it makes it a little bit more manageable for them. But this is an effective technique as well. Comic juxtaposition. This is linking together with no commentary items which normally do not go together. Again, we're working on the element of surprise. You've maybe heard me use the expression in class, that guy or that person or whatever was deader than disco and dinosaurs. Again, disco and dinosaurs seemingly do not go together. It creates kind of a comic juxtaposition, but they both fit the intent of the phrase. So anytime you set two elements against one another in a comical manner, you might even consider, if you remember John Donne's The Flea, the use of the flea to represent the sex act is very much a comic juxtaposition in a sense, in that that's not two things we would normally associate with one another. So that's that, okay? Mock epic or mock heroic. This is essentially, if you remember back to first semester in Canterbury Tales, the Nun's Priest Tale, which is set, it's a bestiary set with animals in a barnyard, yet these animals are raised to kind of represent these fairly sophisticated ideas, and there's very elevated diction and things like that. It's very bombastic speech that somehow over-exaggerates a very trivial or low subject. That would be an example of the mock heroic. Parody, I feel like you understand that. The key to parody, though, that I want to point out is that in anything that's a parody, to fully appreciate it, you have to understand the original. I'm going to say that again. You have to understand the original for a parody to be effective. Example given, the Scary Movie franchise, if you saw any of those. Essentially all of those movies that, I think it was largely the Wayans brothers that did them. If you were not familiar with the scary movies that they were satirizing or parodying, then it wouldn't have made as much sense, wouldn't have been as funny, would not have been as entertaining had you known the actual original work. So it's very important to remember. Okay, almost done. So inflation is the act of taking a real life situation and blowing it out of proportion to make it ridiculous and showcase its faults. And the elephant in the room, the biggest thing we could think of here in terms of an example would be the way some people are reacting to the coronavirus spread. Not to make light of it, not to belittle it, it's very serious, I get that, but at the same time, it occurred to me when I was reading this definition, thinking of how to get this across to you guys, it's kind of like inflation or exaggeration in humor. One example of inflation would be taking something like, if I said, we're on a mission as a family, we've got to get to the Publix and secure something we need desperately. Any risks are worth it. We have to make this happen. Failure is not an option. We have to get to the Publix and secure an 18-pack of toilet paper. So that would be an example of inflation. Again, over the top, simple everyday activity like buying groceries or toilet paper has been inflated to seem like a really huge deal these days. So that's the best example I can think of right now is inflation. Diminution. Diminution means basically the opposite of inflation, which is taking these real life things and reducing them to make it seem kind of ridiculous or showcase where the problems is. So it would be taking like if I compared World War III to two goats fighting over a carrot, strange as that sounds, that would be a great example of diminution. I would use that very insignificant and trivial experience or situation to demonstrate something that's actually a lot bigger than it apparently seems. So, a lot of these are kind of common sense once you start looking at the word itself. So I would encourage you to read closely over the examples that are given. Certainly look these words up in other contexts and see if you can find things that would help you. But otherwise, that's the gist of the major ideas. Ethos, pathos, and logos. You got those probably throughout your high school career. Those are very much still satirical techniques, even though they're used primarily in persuasive, argumentative type texts. In a way, that's what satire is. It is argumentative in a sense. It is persuasive in a sense, because the creators of satire, the intention is to teach a lesson, demonstrate a point, make a point by showing kind of the silly side of it. So at the end of the day, that's the art of the satirist. So further questions, please reach out online. My 15 minutes is almost up here, so I will just say not all of the pieces that I give you that you see assigned will have all of the elements, so certainly don't feel weird about leaving blanks on the charts and the such. But at the end of the day, I just want to make sure you understand the nature of satire, what it's trying to do, and the devices that these satirists use to create their art. If you have further questions, please reach out to me. Really hope to see you guys soon. Godspeed. Hopefully you're doing well. Look forward to seeing you in the near future. Thank you.